Well, just because Halloween's over doesn't mean we can't talk about another horror film, so let's get into it right now. Hey, welcome back to my channel. I know Halloween's over, but there was one more horror film I'm going to review before I take a little break from horror films, and that movie is Scream 2. Yes, the sequel to the 1996 smash hit. Matter of fact, this film went into production 6 months after Scream was... Principal photography started 6 months after Scream got released, because off the success of Scream, Dimensions greenlit Scream 2 immediately, and it was Scream 2 was in theaters less than a year from the original release of Scream 1. Scream 1 came out December 20th of 1996. Scream 2 was released December 12th of 1997. It's rated R, 2 hours long, had a little bit bigger budget, $24 million bucks. Upon release, it made $101 million in this country and 172 worldwide, so another big hit for Dimensions. And Wes Craven came back to direct this, so did Kevin Williamson came back to write the script. And I think that's why this sequel, although rushed, works so well, is because they kept a core creative team together. And it shows through the care that the movie was shot with, and it was written, the characters were written with. So that helps a big deal. And for this film, Neve Campbell came back as Sidney Prescott, now in college, not in high school anymore. Courtney Cox as Gale Weathers is back. And since the first film, Gale Weathers has written a book, The Woodsboro Murders, about what happened at Woodsboro that night, or those days. And David Arquette's back as Dewey. He's no longer a police officer, and he walks with a limp because at the end of the first film, he was stabbed in the back, and he tells Randy he has a severed nerve. That's why he limps now. Also, we got Timothy Olyphant in an early film role as Mickey. He goes to school with them. He's a film student. He goes to the same classes as Randy does, because Randy goes to the same college. He's back. Jamie Kennedy's back as Randy, and he's at the same college as Sidney as a film student. Jerry O'Connell's in this film as Derek, Sidney's new boyfriend. We also got Sarah Michelle Gellar. She plays, she's a sorority sister in this movie. She has some lines. She's on screen for a little bit, not a lot, but she's on screen. And Joshua Jackson, an early film role. This is the year before he started working on Dawson's Creek. We also got Jada Pinkett Smith and Omar Epps, and that's how we start this film. We see Jada Pinkett Smith and Omar Epps, their boyfriend and girlfriend, and they're going to see Stab, which is a movie based on Gale Weathers' book, based on Sidney Prescott's life and what happened in Woodsboro. And Jada Pinkett Smith's character is telling Omar Epps' character about how she doesn't like scary movies and why, she's like, I'd much rather go see the Sandra Bullock film down the street. And he's kind of poking fun, like, nobody wants to see Sandra Bullock shit, and it's like an early premiere for this film, like a sneak peek, and the movie theater is giving everybody who comes in a costume, a Ghostface costume. So when they walk in the theater, half the theater is dressed as Ghostface. And the movie starts, and the Stab movie on screen, it even says the credits directed by Robert Rodriguez. Well, Robert Rodriguez actually did direct some of the scenes from the Stab film, the movie within a movie in this film. Which I thought was pretty neat. And Omar Epps goes out to get some popcorn and that, and then she comes back. And Omar Epps, as she's going back in the theater, Omar Epps jumps out and scares her with the Ghostface mask on. And she slaps him. She goes, well, I don't like being scared. And he goes to the bathroom, and she goes to sit down in the theater. And while he's in the bathroom, he goes into one of the stalls, and he hears noise from the one next door. And unfortunately, in the worst place to get killed, he gets stabbed in the head through the partition wall by Ghostface, our new killer. And Ghostface puts on his jacket and goes to sit down with Jada Pinkett Smith's character. Now she thinks it's Omar Epps' character, and she's talking to him like it is. And then all of a sudden, a scare scene happens on screen, and she puts her head on his shoulder and her hand on his arm. And when she raises up, she realizes it's covered in blood, and she starts panicking. And he starts stabbing her multiple times, and nobody in the theater does anything. They think it's a publicity stunt, and she basically dies in front of the whole theater. And then it cuts to Scream 2, and then we're reintroduced to Sidney Prescott now at Windsor College. She wakes up, and she looks like she's moved on from what happened at Woodsboro. Like, she's living her life, and she looks good. And she gets a prank phone call, and she expects that, like, she tells her roommate she expected it because it's opening weekend for the film. It'll die down after a couple weeks. And one of her other girls in this dormitory area says, you got to see the news. And she sees the news about these two kids who went to Windsor College, Windsor seniors, got killed at the movie theater. Wyatt was playing Stab. So she immediately thinks this has something to do with them. So she goes to seek out Randy, who Randy's in his film class with Joshua Jackson, Sarah Michelle Gellar, Timothy Olyphant, and other students. And they're talking about sequels to films, which this is a sequel. And it's a cool little scene about them talking about like T2, Godfather 2, Aliens, stuff like that. And it's a really nice scene. And Randy goes to leave, and Nev's waiting for Sidney Prescott's waiting for him, and she's like, it's happening again, Randy. He's like, no, this has nothing to do with us. People get killed at movie theaters all the time. And then Derek shows up, her new boyfriend, to comfort her because he heard about it. And then we see Dewey, and there's a press conference. Gale, like, the gang's back together. And we come to find out that Dewey's not a police officer anymore. He says, I came to keep an eye on you, and I'm going to try to help the police any way I can. And we get this sense, like, he has an interaction with Gale, that after the first film, they dated for a little bit. And Dewey, they broke up, and Dewey's very hurt by this because he thought she was a better, like, he thinks she's like she's not a very good person. And so their relationship is very confrontational at the beginning, or through most of this film until the end. And then now we see the scene with Sarah Michelle Gellar. She's a sorority sister, and her sorority and this other sorority are hosting this mixer at this other house. So she's left behind this big old Victorian house by herself, and she's supposed to be there if any of her sisters call and are drunk, that she would go pick them up for safety. And she gets a phone call thinking it's her boyfriend, and it's not. It's Ghostface. And it's a really tense, really well shot scene. Wes Craven really nicely shoots this movie like he does most of his films. Wes Craven was a very, very good filmmaker, and that's why he was one of the masters of horror. And she ends up getting killed, and Sidney, at the party they're at, everybody at that party goes to see where all the cops are going, and she goes back in the house to get her jacket. Nobody's in there, and she has a run-in with Ghostface. And as the film goes on, she's in protective custody. Like, two cops are watching her at all times because they realize that the Ghostface killer is after her again. And we get a scene, I'm going to fast forward to the end, where the cops are taking her out of town, and Ghostface brutally kills the cops and her friend that was going with her. And she's a theater major. She was just about to have her first starring role, and she hears music at the theater hall, so she goes back there. And she finds her boyfriend Derek hanging from like this cross. And Mickey shows up and reveals himself to be the killer. And he makes her believe that Derek was in on it. And Derek starts flipping out, I'll kill you, you motherfucker. And Mickey shoots him in the chest and kills him. And Sid tries to get away. Mickey stops her. And then we get our second killer shows up. And it's none other than Mrs. Loomis, who was pretending to be this reporter the whole time, Debbie Salt. And she has Gale Weathers at gunpoint because she's already knifed Dewey at the editing area for the film department. And she goes on to say, I found Mickey here, an up-and-coming serial killer who was very eager, and all he needed was a little nurturing, and I needed help to avenge my son, because your mother was the reason my marriage broke up and drove my son to do what he did, and you killed my son, and I'm here to kill you. It's basically her whole thing. And Mickey's like, yeah, I'm going to blame the movies as my defense, and the Christian Coalition and all these conservative groups will pay for my legal fees. It'll be airtight. And he thinks he's going to get off, and then Mrs. Loomis shoots and kills Mickey. Well, we think. He does have one last pop-up at the end and gets shot in the head. And then we have our final confrontation. Cotton Weary shows up. He's in this film because he got out of prison because he was wrongfully accused, because we found in the first film Billy actually killed Sidney's mother, not Cotton Weary. And Cotton's in the movie throughout. He pops up. He just wants to get an interview with Sidney. He wants to make some money off the situation. And he's trying to make nice with her. And at the end, he shows up, and he helps Gale and Sidney get out of this predicament. And then the killer, Mrs. Loomis, and Mickey get shot in the head. And that's the end of the film. Now, doing some research, I found out, I don't know if they ever shot this, but I guess it was written where at the end of the film, as it was, the credits were getting ready to roll, they were going to show another Ghostface killer up on the clock tower at the college, looking down over the scene, setting up the third film. I don't know if they ever shot that, but they said it was written. It was in one of the scripts. Who knows? It might not have been in the final shooting script. Who knows? But that was one possibility. Matthew Lillard's in this film too. Just in the background at the one party, you'll see him. He's on screen. He visited the set to say hi to everybody, and Wes Craven put him in the movie quickly. Wes Craven had to submit this film 8 times to the MPAA to get his R rating. Wes Craven notoriously had a hard time with the MPAA throughout his whole career, and this movie was no different. This movie is a very solid sequel, and considering how fast the turnaround was for making this sequel from the first film, I think, again, like I said in the beginning, I think having Kevin Williamson back as a screenwriter and Wes Craven directing, I think that really helped. Wes Craven does a nice job shooting this film. He really ratchets up the suspense where it needs to be. It's funny in parts. It's a breeze to get through. It's the longest Scream movie, 2 hours, but it's a breeze to get through. It never drags. And the body count's higher. There's more blood, like Randy says when he gives his sequel speech to Dewey. More blood, more carnage candy. And there is more of that in this film. I think it's a well-done sequel. And when I first saw it, I saw it twice in the theaters that year when it came out. And when I first saw it, I didn't know who the killer was. Mickey or Mrs. Loomis or Mickey, I didn't even think of that. And so if it's your first time seeing it, yeah, it can be a surprise who the killer is. But it's a well-done sequel to a very successful first film. And this sequel was very successful in its own right. That's why we got a third one and then eventually a fourth. But I would give Scream 2 an 8.75 out of 10. Yes, an 8.75 out of 10 for Scream 2. I think it's a really well-done sequel for a slasher film that was rush production. I think they really did a nice job with it. So, yes, that's it for Scream 2. If you hit the thumbs up for me, subscribe, share this video. I greatly appreciate it. I'm going to be back later this week with the 1989 Sylvester Stallone film, Lock Up. I'm going to go away from horror films for a little bit, do some other films. Yep, Lock Up's my next review. Hope everyone's doing well out there, and I'll be back soon. Thanks. Bye.